Добрый день всем. Давайте будем начинать.
Hello, everyone. Let us be getting started with a workshop on behalf of the Almaty UNESCO Cluster Bureau. I'd like to welcome you. My name is Maher Masanov. This is the third webinar dedicated to the creative and cultural industries, in which we're going to be discussing various aspects of creative work together with the experts, with our international experts who are part of the UNESCO Convention panel on the promotion of various types of culture, creative industries. I'd like to remind you that we already had two workshops, one on the 16th, the other on the 19th of March. One was dedicated to the topic of the strategy of the creative economy for the sustainable future. The second one was related to the literary art. The recordings of both workshops are available on our YouTube channel. I'm going to send you a link in our chat box to the playlist. Both workshops are available in both English and Russian. And also, there will also be a recording of today's workshop and also several other webinars in the series which we're planning to be happening soon. Right now, you can see the links to these previous workshops and to our website, the social media links where you can follow the news on these webinars and some other activities, other projects by UNESCO Cluster Bureau in Almaty. Today, we would like to be talking about the public art, and our today's speaker, the speaker who spoke the last time, this is Mэй Jin Hэ, an independent consultant, trainer, and the art specialist with a wealth of experience in a broad range of cultural practices, including both visual, literary, and other types of art. So basically, she's worked for quite some time with various outlets of the British Council in New Zealand, Hong Kong, China. And back on March 19th, she held this other workshop on the topic of the literary art and performance. Well, I'd like to remind you that our communication with the speakers, you can communicate via our chat facility where you can express your reactions, ask some questions. And also, if you'd like to speak, you can also write to us in the chat box and we can enable you to say something. This is it from my side about the logistics. Without further delays, I'm giving the floor to our speaker, Ms. Mэй Jin Hэ, and I'd like to welcome you at this new webinar. You're welcome, Ms. Mэй Jin.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. For me, it's 7 p.m. In New Zealand, and we are enjoying the last bit of our summer, beginning of our autumn. Hello to you all. Thanks very much. I can see a few of you have attended the session that I delivered last week. I hope it was good value for you. And today I'm talking about another favorite subject of myself, public art. I really have developed my career working in public art, actually. If I look at, there is a line of my first project being poetry on the underground in London and poetry on the metro in Shanghai. So that was my first art project when I joined the British Council in our Shanghai office at the time. So it is really close to my heart, and public arts range from, it's just art in a public domain, and that's where the interest comes from. So before I start, I prepared a presentation. Before I start sharing some of my thoughts, I would like to invite you to join me and share your perspective to start with. I think last time we tried Minty and it took us a bit of time to get used to it. Hopefully this time we'll have an easy go. Let me share the screen. So again, if you have a mobile phone or if you are in front of a computer, can you type in minty.com onto your browser, and then you can type in the code to share with me and the other participants what would be most useful today for you? So I have 3 options there. If your answer is not those 3, you are most welcome to type in the chat box as well. But if you play with me, I'd like to know which area is most interesting for you. Do you like to know more about the policy side? How could public art be made available for people? And you know, how does it work? And the second one would be, would you like to hear more examples of public art? And you want to know how, what are the things that you could do in the public domain? And then the third one would be the impact of public art. You want to know what are the implications, what are the positive or potential risk of running a public art project. So I can see 2 people have given some answers. Can we give a little bit time, see if we could gather some answers from the group? Okay, interested in the policy element of it. I also have a second question. So if you answer the first question, feel free to answer the second question as well. We'll just give a couple more minutes in case people needs to reach out to their phone and get their device working. The policy is a very important part because the public art is in the domain, in the public domain. Therefore, you know, you might be needing to get public support, even if the project itself has private funding, but the policy itself is an interesting one and a useful one. I think also the policy, in a way, particularly when you are thinking about designing a policy, you inevitably would think about the impact. Inevitably, you would think about if you are using public funds or public space, what it is that you, as a policymaker or as an enabler, state player or municipal player, what do you expect to get out of that investment? So it's a very interesting element of the 3. Okay, see, I want to see if we have more people who are potentially gonna be able to help us vote. Okay. We might be just using this as an example. Thank you again for participating. So I'm going to launch on to the second question. The second question is, okay, if that works. Maybe I'll manually go to the second question. Oh, okay. We have already got some answers on the second question. People are quicker than me. So the second question is, use one word to describe public art. And so we have a few words here. Let me see. So we're thinking about, there is a visibility element of public art. Oh, heritage, that's interesting. So are you thinking about heritage building to have a public art element to revitalize a public heritage space? Interesting. And shows, performances, certainly. Entertainment, very good. So visibility and audience. So we're thinking about in the public space, you would have a high visibility and you have your audience with you in that case. Great, thank you. So that's really good. I'm really interested in what you think about public art and what's in your mind, and that really helps me frame my thoughts and understand what could be most of value for you today. So if I then go back to the presentation that I prepared, which is the second part of my sharing, thanks for UNESCO's kind invite for me to share some of my experience and thoughts today then on the public art. So when we think of public art, I think it's very important that we look at, for me to prepare this presentation, I looked at structure today's session in the 4 elements. The first, I want to talk about the notion of public. What does it mean? What is the implication? And I will talk about the benefit and influence and what to do and potentially how to do it. And so that's probably the organizing part of it. And then if we have time, I could share with you a few public art projects that I have done myself, and hopefully that could be an inspiration in one way or another. But in any case, I've provided some of the material to our UNESCO colleagues, so you'll get those at the end of the session. Okay, the notion of public. The notion of public is full of, could be full of social tension, and the public space is very often a contested site. What I mean by this is, art, in a lot of cases where you guys have said, it could be entertaining, it is a show, it could be very jolly. In other cases, it could also be highly visible. When it's highly visible, that means that people would have different opinions, and it could be a contested area. It could be an area that you might expect to have debate. You might expect to have sometimes controversy. So I have found the examples, some of the most visible examples of public art. So in some cases, for this one, Maya Lin, the Vietnam Memorial Wall that she developed at the time, this one is highly controversial. At the time, she was only a graduate student, doesn't have a lot of track records or social capital when she first did the work. So it was, in a lot of ways that people have objected to it. Some people may want it to be a different, expected the war to be a very different one, out of a national competition, for example. So that's when she was still as an undergraduate student, in Yale. Nobody heard about her, but the work that she presents is to have the names of the people who had unfortunately lost their lives in the Vietnam War to be carved onto the wall. There were like 57,000, almost 58,000 of people's name carved on it. The work was completed in 1982. So that was something that out of a national's interest in this and come out. At the time, highly controversial. Now it's probably one of the most recognizable public art globally. So it's an of interest. So in terms of a policy angle from some of our audience's interest, you have to decide that in order for the country to come together to memorize Vietnam War, you wanted to have this space made available. You want to have this budget made available. You want to have the mechanism of a proposal and bidding process, and contestable bidding process, and at the time, who's going to select based on what criteria. So for this particular case, Maya's work was out of that for 1,422 submissions. and she wanted, you know, what was the criteria? The criteria, if the criteria is, you know, you have to have certain years of experience, or you have to have track record of this, then she potentially would not get it. And so that's an interesting example. Another one, Richard Surrey, Sarah's work was highly controversial as well. Around a similar period of time in 1981, so this work was produced and put on Foley Federal Plaza, so it's a big plaza in New York. When it was put on, so it's 3 meters high and 30-some meter long. You know, Sarah at the moment obviously is one of the most recognizable public art or sculpture artists, if you like. At the time, he's already have some reputation, is already gained a lot of recognition, but the work have faced a great controversy at the time, and you know, when the new mayor got in place a few years later, they started a hearing process, and then this work in 1989 was eventually removed from the site. People, you know, people who have objected to it felt like it was unsafe, although that's not really that. You know, that this is, you know, highly engineered. There is not a real risk, but it's perceived risk, and it sort of interrupted how people use the square, and people, you know, people really at the time, although not a high majority, interesting enough, there was only 59 out of 100 something, so it wasn't even reached over half of the objection, but it was considered to be, you know, the decision was made to remove it. Again, you know, who has what process to develop and potentially remove a public art is questionable. And this is a classic example of why a public art project can be quite can be quite a can bring controversy and could be highly contested for the public. I want to give you a couple of more examples. So we're talking about, you know, the type of public art. The first two that we talked about are the ones that are commissioned to be mark a historic moment or commemorate a particular event. Another category is land art. So artwork that is in the nature, not artwork that is out of our usual urban environment, where you probably see more art in either museums or galleries or as sculptures in squares in some of the public spaces. So this one is done by Nancy Holt. It is called the Sun Tunnel. So she put 4 tunnels, we can see 2 here, aligned with the sunset and sunrise, and viewers would go and experience and can see the sun through the tunnels. So the land art movement in the 60s onwards and until the started in the 60s, that type of art really is to rebel, and comes with a certain level of rebel. Comes with certain interest of to look at how art interact with our bigger environment, systematic environment, particularly the land. And in a lot of cases, this type of art would need photography, film, and other means to reach to its audience. So this is certainly different from, you know, the Vietnam War, which is basically, you know, a place that general public goes to see it, and as they or passing by as they go their businesses around. So this is, you have to seek for it, and it's a significant sort of signature piece of work that is out there. This is another one, site-specific or land art by Anish Kapoor. This one is actually in New Zealand. Actually, the one that we shared earlier, Richard Sarah also have a piece of art in the same location. This is a Gibbs farm. Anish Kapoor was commissioned to do this piece by Alan, who runs Gibbs Fund, or invested in Gibbs Fund. So that is, again, another type of land art. This is by, if we go back to some of the questions you guys asked about art policy, this is financed by individual collector in his own farm in New Zealand, Auckland. He does have, so Auckland have a public art policy, so he does have tax incentives, and particularly when this Gibbs farm now meet the condition of allowing public to view it, organized obviously, because that's where he lives as well, through arts galleries, researchers, and charitable organizations for fundraising. This is, again, you know, supported by an incentive scheme of public art policy, but then at the end really is one businessman's vision. You know, he wanted to have it, Alan Gibbs, so Gibbs Farm in New Zealand. If any of you would be able to visit me in Auckland, we could go and appreciate this piece and many other land art pieces or commissioned pieces in Gibbs Farm. This again is a huge piece. I think is the, if you see the expand is more than 8 meters. I think it looks like a lot more than that, and 25 meters long, and it used the material going through the hill, and the wind comes through the red material, looks like it's breathing. It's quite magical, this art. So this type of art, you know, it is public art, but the audience is actually quite limited or restricted in one way or another to the artwork itself. People appreciate it, imagine it more often through the images, through the film. Okay, so we've talked about the two, the type of public art, the two types, on the top, the large-scale sculptures and monuments in visible urban centers, and land art. I think one of you also mentioned entertainment in public art, which obviously, you know, serious work can be entertainment, but there is one type of public art called plop that is very entertaining. So I'm going to share an example of that later. Oh, okay. That's here. So the plop art is one of a very popular example is the cow parade. It's, you know, there are a few of these, but essentially artists would do really quite decorative work on the cow, and there will be quite a lot of them be in one go, and a lot of artists involved in it. You might see on the bottom right picture, and that's the, you know, the cow parade, and people love it. And critics may not pay serious attention to this, but this type of public art or public engagement, if you like, has its own value. It has its value in ways that, you know, it really is something that have, you know, now it's been done for many years in many cities. The organizers have certain experience, but, you know, they just really engage engage with families, engage with the audience in ways that potentially some of other artwork may require a bit more from the audience in terms of understand art history or understand appreciating the social context or, you know, other aspects of it. But this particular type of art presentation organized primarily by private companies who are interested and usually have a lot of sponsorship goes behind it, because they draw big crowds to this type of event. So it has been successfully run in a lot of urban centers. I personally have seen it run in Hong Kong in shopping malls, and kids love it and people love it. So it's a type of public engagement. Some critics may not categorize this as public art. And in terms of a policy angle, this type of work, you probably don't necessarily need to give financial investment in it, because it's already a very commercial setup and it could attract its own investment. See if I could go back to my slides. Okay. So that's prop art, and I hope that I have been justifiable to talk about it, because it is controversial in a way that prop art, some art critics would probably not consider them as proper art. I know that, you know, many of you are interested in the benefit of arts and the influences, and be able to then look at possible policies for public art. So public art, in a way that, you know, many of you have said, is visibility, is engagement. It is interaction with public spaces, which then also includes civil participation, encourages people to interact with each other. Under the pandemic view, obviously, you know, with social distancing, but then, you know, still public spaces needs certain nurturement, you know, so the vitality of a public space could be supported by public art, and public art could be all sorts, you know. So again, some of you shared that it could be a show. Absolutely. I have some examples that I could give where public art is a festival and it's a cinema screening. It is, you know, activities in a public space which give, again, people a reason to go to those public spaces, to interact with each other, to increase their pride of a city. Again, this goes to the second point, you know, the identity of its people and its place. You know, people come to a place and come to a show for a great reason. And a research that was done by Edinburgh Festival, during the festival time, there was a lot of public display of shows, performances, and you ask residencies, you know, to say, hey, what do you think about these? And some of them, they may not even go to any of the formal shows and performances, and they would highly rate the festival because they can see some of the public display of it, and that gives them a certain pride of being a citizen of Edinburgh, for example. Another one that that's particularly interesting in the recent couple of decades is placemaking, which has a direct economic regeneration function in the arts making. So introducing public art to a place that may be considered as unsafe, considered as, you know, a lot of violence, or considered as abandoned, considered as unloved. Having public art and making the society and residency to engage with that place in a meaningful way, help generate the place, help the place transfer, and therefore brings direct economic and social benefit through the process. So some of you might remember this group as ensemble, and you probably also know the Turner Prize. So Turner Prize typically is given to artists who has a significant achievement, and usually at a very high level in the UK. You know, typically would be, you know, in public art senses, you know, and Anthony Gormley has got a Turner Prize, and his work was a sort of a land work of the big, gigantic red figure standing on the field, and that type of work. Whereas Ensemble, they got Turner Prize in 2015, and they're a practice of architects and designers, and their project is to make social housings, design social places. So really, that's where art really going into that very, you know, from a piece of art to be, you know, in some of the narrow signs, you know, you engage it as an audience. And you don't at the end actually live in it, or you don't at the end actually have a lot of material or functional benefit of a piece of art in a narrow sense of art. You know, you got a lot of other benefit from participating in it, experience it. But in this particular case, the ensemble, what they have done is they really going through a process. Their work is a process, going through a process of engage with the locals, engage with public, and then design a social housing or transfer an area for people. So this is really quite a different approach, and well, quite an interesting approach to look at what is public art and its benefit to its wider, you call it audience or stakeholders, and this is quite a special case. So when public art actually have a very direct, tangible result for the society, and direct and tangible economic benefit for its society. Okay. Right, and we talked about the corporate. It makes me laugh, but this is a type of public art that very often get brushed off from the public art domain, but it has its own value and engage with people. Okay, so I want to then talk about the policy bit specifically. So what to do on the policy level to engage and to promote public art. The most significant state policy for public art, or city policy for public art, is potentially the one that some of you might know. It's called percentage for public art. So that means, I think New York City have that, London have that, and Auckland here, where I live, have that. So you have a general policy in infrastructure development and in development, in building, in any of the big building movement, right? When you create a public space, which could be a shopping mall, which could be an apartment, which could be a railway, which could be, in this particular case, Auckland is developing a lot of railway connections. Whenever there is an investment in building something, and particularly there is a public element of it, the public art policy requires that whoever is doing the development work give a percentage to create public art. In many cases, that could be ranging from 0.1% to point, whatever. In Auckland, the range around 0.1 to 0.075. So that's quite a significant investment in art, and obviously recognize that, the space can be vitalized and can be enriched by having public art in it. So, if you have a look of the current structure of Auckland Council's art department, they would have someone who specifically look after for public art, and this person under the general would then work with the railway development, which we have right now, to say, okay, right, you have a big infrastructure project going on, and within that you need to do a calculation of the total cost of the project. Within that, 0.75% goes to public art, which can equal to a multi-million budget. Within that budget, how are you going to realize it? What are the ideas to put that money into good use, and what are the strategies, and what are the things that you need help to commission artwork, commission projects and programs. So that is potentially the most significant state policy that that people have been using for public art. And then obviously with the public expenditure, you might then consider doing a sentiment survey, or doing economic and social economic survey to look at its benefit and to look at its investment, return on investment. And in any cases, you also would want to form a partnership with the business or the entity who is conducting the infrastructure development to see in what ways it would benefit them and make the investment worthwhile for them. Within that, you also look at potentially different art policies that a country would have, and that is arm's length policy, which is a British model, ministry-led policy, which is more of a French model, and the public and private funding partnership, which is more of a US model. But all those models intertwine in a way. So the one that I described with Auckland, that they follow very much an arm's length policy model, which is more, we're familiar with about it being a British model, means that the state would give the money, but the states would not define exactly what are you going to do, and the states might have advisors and experts to help you formalize, help you determine what type of public art you might have in that space, and how best to organize it, giving your resources. And obviously, in other cases, if there is a government-led project, then you might then say, okay, the government then would do from the very beginning to fund investment to realize it to the end, and then in any country, you could potentially have a public-private partnership, which is probably the most common model that people use. That means when you talk about public art, I guess in any case there is a partnership with public, and that public may be a local board, maybe your municipal level of governance, or it could be the state's level. The private partnership really has been very significant player and investor in putting the resources in realizing public art. This would be encouraged by tax incentive, but also business motivations, business interest as well. So in China, a lot of the public art projects probably all done through that level in Hong Kong as well. So there is a museum, a shopping mall museum called in Hong Kong, which then they also did quite a lot in mainland China, is to build a museum in the shopping mall, and throughout the shopping mall you would have art pieces. So it's, you know, that could be considered a public-private partnership. And because Hong Kong also have a great incentive for expenditure in for investment in arts through tax deduction, and the tax pretty low anyway. So that has enabled a lot of the public art, particularly, you know, the sculptures and that type around, but they don't always show up at the most thoughtful level. So it really depends on the vision of that particular investor. But then that encourages the diversity and energy, I guess, in commissioning public art for city and in public spaces. Okay. I think I probably mentioned quite briefly, because I think on this one that it is important that you do consider the nature of public art projects. You know, from the beginning of setting up the policy is about working together, it's about consultation, it's about engaging with people in the public domain to look at what public art could be done, and what policy, what percentage, if you are going to the percentage route, and what are the returns for the art. The resources, you know, to look at again, what other cities have done in terms of percentage for the art. Sorry, there is a missing word there, percentage for the art, and looking at what educational other wraparound activities that you might have to plan and engage for your public art projects. The public art project, you know, it can be a performance, a festival, and those will go away, or it can be something that's there for a really long time. So you design a particular education program, an engagement project to make sure that you get the best from that, you know, and do an evaluation plan actually at the beginning. But evaluation is really important then for you to justify the return on investment, either be it an economic value or a social, cultural, economic value combined. And sometimes you could looking at environmental value if it's about raising awareness in a certain area, environmental, civil participation, you know, all these other instrumental values that could be considered and could be included in designing your public art project. So I think I still have some time. I'm happy to answer questions at the moment, but also happy to share a few projects that I've done, which is a good range of different things. Hopefully that could be of an interest as well. What do you think?
Thank you, Ms. Mэй Джин Хэ. Well, in an effort to respond to a question, I think let us ask our distinguished audience to express their opinions in our chat box. And while the audience is warming up to express their opinion, can you show us the second PDF file you wanted to show us?
Yeah, sure.
And I assume we should probably be able to send it to our participants. They should be able to download this file and take a look at it. Let me put the link in the chat box, put it on the Google Drive so you can download this file, which our speaker is going to present to you.
Okay, let me see if I can get the second one. Yeah, here. So this one is in the PDF format. Can you guys see okay?
Да-да-да, мы хорошо видим.
Yes, we can see it well. Thank you, Mэй Jin.
Great. Okay, so this is one of the projects that I did in Hong Kong. Is Sir Anthony Gombrey's Event Horizon. So I just want to give you a little bit more project details so you understand, you know, there is the artist's thoughts and ideas of those projects. Very often is the attracting point, is why everybody then got behind and to support the project. So Anthony conceived this project in 2010 when the global population reached a balanced 50% of the global population lives in urban environment and 50% of the global population lives in rural community. So then he started to do this called Event Horizon. If you search Anthony Gombrey, he has, he's a significant British artist and have done a wide range of artwork. And you might see in the screen there that it's one of his sculpture on the beach and facing the ocean. So that's one of his land projects. But in this particular one that we did that I did in Hong Kong, it's 31 of his sculptures being placed around Hong Kong in the central district business area. For this project to happen, we need to get buildings, and so 27 of those were on building tops, just the one that we saw. On top of a roof. You will see one here, but some of you might be able to see there is another one on the right hand top corner of Standard Chartered Bank. There is a little dot on top of that building. That is the highest point of the entire installation. So you have one little figure on Standard Chartered's bank building top, and another figure here. Anthony's vision is for people to appreciate how small and how the human forms in contrast with our built world, the society, the city that we man-made, you know, we have built, and then contrasting with our own body, his own body. So this is his body. So 4 of those are putting on public squares and in intersections of buildings. People can touch it. It's made of iron. So for this project to happen, first of all, we have to engage with the Hong Kong government, who need to be behind the project in principle, because quite a few buildings belongs to the government. Even if we don't need their blessing, they still own those buildings. And then there is so we have to deal with 31 building owners. And then there was, altogether the building owners, local district board, landlords, government departments. So you need to have work with fire department, work with transport department because it's on the footpath, work with, sponsors. So this particular project, government didn't put any financial resource in it. So they didn't pay for it per se. And the work wasn't paid by the government, but the government support is essential to make it happen. And then works with, a range of education. So you can see on the left-hand side is a lecture at the university, and then we develop a curriculum for schools to help understand and appreciate the work. And then we have to work with a range of social services, including the police department, so they don't get too worried if people call to say, hey, someone on the rooftop is going to jump off, because they might mistaken it. And then work with the fire department, work with suicidal prevention department, so they understand this is a public art project going on. So This is something that I did in Hong Kong, which is really rewarding, again, high profile. But the government didn't have to put any money in it. We had a large number of sponsorship, buildings and legal sponsorship, and landlord and manufacturing and a range of supporters behind this project, mostly commercial. And then we had 6 educational institutional partners in this to get the message out. So when you have an opportunity like this, you know, having a range of educational and public engagement is vital. And then we produced a publication, as you can see on the right. This is another project which I've run in different parts of China and Hong Kong and in the UK. So this is a project which I think probably run in the UK for the longest time, called Poetry on the Underground, and that project has been extremely successful, and the London Underground has been a great example of embodied public art. So they have poetry on the underground, art on the platform, and I was really interested in this project. So I did, as I mentioned, my first project was running an underground poetry on the underground project when I was in Shanghai. It was an exchange project in poetry on the London Underground. So this is interesting. As you can see the point here, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And that's really, you know, then putting Mena's word, lightless. She was invited to visit Hong Kong and then was commissioned to write this poem. And then this poem was put on the Hong Kong trams for 3 months together with other poems. And the result has been really phenomenal in the way that, you know, the trans is really loved, have 150 years history in Hong Kong, and in a highly commercial sense, that any of those spaces will be considered advertisement space. And then this really invites people to stop, reflect, and read a poem. And this particular poem is very gentle in a way, but then was highly appreciated by the local, and really just makes, you know, their journey a lot more insightful and thoughtful in a way. So, and the one at the bottom is poems in the public space in China, across in Wuhan, across multiple locations. And so this again gives people, this is underneath a highway, and that usually is unutilized and quite gloomy sometimes, that space. And by putting a poetry in it, really enlightens it. And then the one on the right is a project and that I mentioned is a London Underground, having the Chinese poems, so the Chinese calligraphy and Chinese poems, and you know, really helps people in two countries in cultural relations sense to understand each other through this type of work. Again, those spaces very often being considered as advertisement space or space that's not being utilized. In this way, really gives a different angle. And then, yeah, so these are a few different other projects that I've done. The one on the left top corner is Thomas Heatherwick span chair being placed in a shopping mall, and actually in two different locations, in a creative center, which they have a big square, and then another one is in a shopping mall where Thomas Heatherwick has designed the building. This really just invites people to participate and appreciate a piece of design work and to understand and then be able to socialize with each other and have some fun, which engage, again, engagement quite simple, really easy to organize. The one on the bottom left is a public screening of Hitchcock. So Hitchcock did Hitchcock's was anniversary around I think in 2012 that was. So we did a large screening of Hitchcock's work in the park, outdoor park, and then we did little mask to make it fun. But you can see people really enjoy coming together, and the screening of an old movie may not be that attractive if it just if it's just a silent movie. In this particular case, we had newly commissioned music to go with it. We made it a party, an interest occasion, so it was like really well received, a popular event. And then sort of a quieter, if you like, but it's called Sound of the City. And the project on the right-hand top is you have people carrying a pre-programmed sound and then invite them to walk around the city. And then those Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connection would then enable the speaker to play commissioned sound. So this is quite intimate. So we talked most of the public art projects being, people come together, high energy, but it can also be done in a very intimate way, which this one is. Each and every audience will carry their own device, and they will go through their own pace and to appreciate the piece of work that's been presented. So I just sort of, mention what are my learning points through doing these type of projects. Really, through the participation, you may change perceptions. Because if I go at the beginning of doing Anthony's project, this particular one, it was a really tough one. And before I get to do this project, it was actually cancelled once or delayed once because people felt like, I don't want a figure to be standing on top of a building, and it is not something that I want. Just back to Richard Sarah's project in the square, people don't necessarily appreciate. And because this is if you look at this, this is a naked body, and we also had a resistance from the public to say, hey, I don't want a naked body in my square, and I don't want my kids to see it. So there is a lot of persuasion, a lot of engagement that I need to do with the public, and I need to also go to the local board to present to the local board to say why this is useful. Again, you engage with people who don't typically deal with art at all. The police office, the fire engineer, the highways office, the building code department, they look for the safety of the building, they look for the safety of people. In their job description, typically it doesn't have anything to do with art. It's through the engagement, hopefully, that we change the perception, and that's the meaning and the beauty of public art. Really, it is, if you go to a museum and gallery and a performance and a show, you go knowing that you are going to experience public art, to experience art. That you are an art audience, whereas public art is different. You already in places that where the public is functioning, where the public is going about doing their thing, so in a way that you interrupt their daily routine, interrupt what they were planning to do really in their day or planning to see in their city, to have this intervention. So and that's where you could potentially change perception through engagement. And then I also felt like it is important to say, we need to get the early adopters. You need to get, with the public art policy, you need to get a few people, really core stakeholders on your side, and they really appreciate and understand what is most important. In this particular case for the project that I'm running, you will always have people who doesn't like it, who doesn't want to support it. It is to what degree that you nurture a community of supporters, that you nurture a community of people who really understand, and you invest the time and energy to bring them on board. And make it worthwhile for them to be part of your project in a way. Very often they would be the ones that you wanted to have their space, or there would be sponsors and supporters who would give you resources, financial support to make it happen. And then with that, you also then really wanted to make sure that you deliver what you promised to do, because those are your supporters, those are investment, or they, at least they invest in it in a way that you would want to make sure that there is a good evaluation, there is a good process of documenting these works, and so then you can demonstrate the benefit of it. Lastly, I just sort of, because it is in the public domain, how you design the experience, how you make the experience educational, inspirational, enjoyable, and you give people surprise and delight. In this particular case, the examples that we see on the screen are the ones that people can really take part, right? So with Thomas Heatherwick's chair, you could just sit on it, you can spin, you can run, it's just a lot of fun, and with a little touch of Hitchcock's Mask, people really respond to the surprise and delight and the interaction and participation of it. The sound project as well, it's something unique, something useful, something interesting, and takes them to a different place. That's what art is. And in the public domain, you invite people to be part of it. That's what I thought from my personal experience organizing those public events, what could be helpful. And again, looking at ways to then engage with thought leaders, engage with people who are policymakers, and get them participated at the beginning to co-design the policy with you is important as well. So those are the sort of policy or debates that have been organized alongside with the public project that I've run. So yeah, so I thought that's useful to present some of these. I've been doing a lot of talking. Are you guys following?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Mэй Jin Hé. It's a very interesting presentation. And I would like to remind all our participants that they can write their questions in the chat. So on my side, I saw that the idea was really very interesting, that the construction companies, for example, or the developers can also appropriate a part of their funds on public art. And I believe that for Central Asia, it's a really very significant topic, because this means that we can establish a dialogue with our government authorities, because there are a lot of towns that are being developed right now. If you take, for example, Nur Sultan, the capital of Kazakhstan, especially when the capital was moved there, the city grown several times, both in terms of the total floor area and in terms of the population. There are huge construction sites in Almaty, Shymkent, and Turkestan, because Turkestan has become the capital of a Turkestan province. And there is a lot of ongoing construction in Tashkent, in Samarkand, in Dushanbe. Therefore, this idea is really very interesting. The way it happens right now in our country, I would say that based on the model that you have been describing, I think that our funding model is resembling much more the French model, because the budget is usually allocated by the government, either through a ministry or through the local government authorities. And there is also the question that we have on the agenda on how the government bodies usually will organize, establish a communication link with the public at large, and how the decisions will be taken. There are some instances when the public is satisfied with the decisions taken by the government. Sometimes there are cases when public is unsatisfied. And right now, I know that there are amendments that are being introduced into the current legislation on the public councils. Zhana Mambetova is writing in the chat that there is also practice in Kazakhstan when, for example, the developers should appropriate a certain amount of money on the development of public art. Thank you very much for this comment. But again, I would like to emphasize that the situation is very heterogeneous, and very often we face a situation when a certain, let's say, object, art object pops up somewhere in the city, but the public is dissatisfied with it. Is very upset with it. There was a very well-known case here in the city of Almaty. I don't know if our speaker has heard about the situation when they decided to establish a huge monument of a squirrel on one of the public squares, and I will try to find a picture of it. It's popular art, but you know, very often the attitude of the government authorities was changing towards this object of art, because you know, they said it's going to be a temporary installation because it is made of hay, and therefore it will not last long. Then they have decided to dismount it, and they decided to remake it and make it of plastic, and then finally it was removed from the square. So the reactions were very controversial, were very different among the population and among various political activists. Therefore, my very modest and shy reaction is that, of course, the models are very interesting, and the examples that you made in your presentation are pretty feasible and doable in Central Asia. But I believe that what really matters is that it is very important to take joint decisions and to establish a very close dialogue with the representatives of the public. So this is my immediate reaction. Maybe somebody else has comments as well.
Yeah, while we're waiting for others to type their questions and comments, if I could just quickly say, like, the percentage for the art is not something that you could done overnight. I think it's a lot of consultation, and in the, you know, I'm one of the 2005 conventions expert facility. For us, for art policy, a good practice of for art policy to be in place is a lot of civil engagement with the civil society. And in this particular case, we need to go out to the wider society, not just in the art, right? You then need to talk to the buildings and the commercial sector, the transport development, if they are the ones who are doing it, or they're just doing different infrastructure projects. And it's to people to understand, people who are building those spaces have a vision for the space, right? It's in that vision, what does arts and culture sits? What does arts and culture sits in that civil engagement? What does arts and culture sit in that identity with its people and its city? So in those discussions, and with good, hopefully good resources and good support and good examples for what have done outside maybe the immediate Central Asia, but in Central Asia as well as wider contexts, then hopefully there will be overlap, there will be mutual interest, and there will be support in such a program as a percentage for art. For that to happen, you know, because that is a significant policy once that is established. So even if the percentage is small, then also to have the support mechanism to help those builders and buildings and developers, because they probably wouldn't have in-house arts experts to be able to do that. In which sense then you create you know, a layer of education and engagement with them on a longer term, and then again help them evaluate. I couldn't emphasize more, evaluation is so important. Then you have the data, you have the support, you have the you know, evidence to say, okay, now this has worked so well for this commercial company, or have worked so well with that train line. You could monitor, you know, anything from crime rate to engagement to people's satisfaction of the space, all sort of things, you know. Again, it needs to be quite site appropriate and meet with where people are as well. In a you know, you want to challenge the ideas always in arts and culture, but also has to meet with where people are, and through that engagement, and give them, you know, delight, give them surprise, and give them some challenge, which is what art does its best.
Thank you very much. And there was one more short commentary from my side. Of course, in this particular series of webinars and in other our initiatives, we will be attracting experts who will be telling us about the most interesting experiences in the international space of the public art, or at the same time, these particular webinars are intended first and foremost to stir the wish and the desire among our creative community, creative individuals, as well as the government bodies to start seeking their own way. And none of the international experiences can simply be by 100% replicated in the local conditions, because the local government, the local public knows much better what forms of the art, what details of this art will be very interesting, very topical, very involving. And of course, it's really very good to be inspired by the international experience, and it's so nice to get, how do I put it? I would say to get a kind of incentive for progressing, for moving ahead. But of course, the work with all stakeholders will play a key role. And since we haven't yet received any comments in the chat, I assume that we probably can summarize and wind up our today's webinar. And I would say the two webinars that Ms. Mэй Jin Hэ conducted for us. It was a great pleasure for us to work with you. And I would like to say that we recorded this webinar, and of course on our YouTube channel, you will have a full recording of our today's event. And all registered participants will receive the links to be able to access this recording. We don't have yet an announcement on our side, but there is a clear understanding that the next webinar will take place on the 23rd of April, same time from noontime to 13:30 Almaty time, and it will be dedicated to the following topic: what is the Creative Central Asia discussion and the transfer of policy in the area of cultural and creative industries. And the link to this webinar will be placed in the chat. And I would like to thank all the participants again. I don't know if Ms. Mэй Jin Hэ would like to say a few final words, and with this we will stop the recording and our webinar.
Yeah, I've got some direct message coming in to say would like to get in touch. Feel free, I'm more than happy to be contacted and answer further questions or share further resources. Yeah, really nice to have this time with you. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you around in Central Asia or in Auckland. Thank you.
Большое спасибо. Да, если у кого-то есть желание
Thank you very much. And if somebody would like to get in touch directly with Ms. Mэй Jin Hэ and to participate any future possibilities of cooperation, the contacts will be provided to you by Cluster UNESCO Bureau. And of course, all the participants will receive the videos and presentations about today's webinar, in which you will also have the contact details about today's speaker. I would like to thank everybody again, and I would like to invite you for our follow-up events, and you are welcome for future cooperation. Thank you very